Hi guys! Tonight we step quietly into a medieval winter evening, and you feel it before you fully understand it. The light is already thinning the sky, lowering itself like a lid, and the air pressing against your face with a sharpness that makes you blink. You probably won't survive this, at least not comfortably. Not without planning, not without habits learned slowly night after night in a world that does not care whether you are warm or not. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you are listening from somewhere warm or somewhere cold, post your location and your local time in the comments. Now dim the lights and you move forward without pause, without ceremony straight into the dark. You are standing in medieval England at the edge of night. There is no switch to flip, no glow from windows stretching down the lane. Darkness arrives as a fact, not an inconvenience. The sun sinks, the temperature follows it, and your body immediately begins negotiating with the cold. Your shoulders tighten, your hands tuck themselves into sleeves without asking permission. This is the coldest part of the day, and everyone around you knows it. A mainstream historical fact settles in early. Medieval England experienced what historians call the Little Ice Age in later centuries, but even before that, winters were colder and more unpredictable than most people today ever experience. Without insulation, central heating, or reliable weather forecasts, cold nights were expected, planned for, and quietly feared. You do not complain about the cold. Complaining does nothing. You adapt. You walk toward a small dwelling, low to the ground, built with thick walls that seem to crouch against the wind. As you step inside, the smell hits you first. Smoke, damp wood, old wool. There is no separation between indoors and outdoors the way you are used to. Cold follows you in, it lingers near the floor, it presses through gaps you did not know were there. The door closes, but the night does not stay outside. You hear the fire before you see it. A low crackle, uneven, cautious. Fire is not decorative here, it is not ambience, it is survival. The hearth sits at the centre of the room like a living thing that needs constant attention. Let it die and the night becomes dangerous. Let it grow too strong and smoke fills the space, burning eyes and lungs. People learned this balance by watching coughing adjusting over generations. There is a quirky tidbit that always surprises modern listeners. Some medieval households believed certain types of wood burned warmer than others in a way that bordered on superstition. Oak was trusted. Ash was respected. Elderwood was avoided by some not because it burned poorly, but because folklore warned it brought bad luck or sickness into the home. Whether true or not, these beliefs shaped what people gathered before winter ever arrived. You move closer to the hearth instinctively. Everyone does. The heat is uneven, stronger on one side of your body, absent on the other. Your face warms while your back remains cold, and you turn slowly like meat over a fire, though no one would ever say it that way out loud. Conversation is quieter at night. Sound carries differently in the cold. Even voices seem to conserve energy. Historians still argue whether medieval people felt cold more intensely than we do, or whether their bodies simply adapted over time. Some suggest constant exposure built tolerance. Others point to records of frostbite illness and winter deaths as evidence that cold was a constant strain. You feel the debate in your own bones as you stand there waiting for the fire to do its work. Night routines begin to unfold around you. Tools are set aside. Animals shift in nearby stalls or corners of the structure. Yes, sometimes they sleep inside or close enough that their body heat matters. You smell them, you hear them breathe. It is not charming, it is practical. Warmth is warmth. You notice how little space there is between people. Personal space is a luxury for warmer centuries. Here bodies cluster naturally drawn together by shared heat. Children lean against adults. Adults lean against walls that still hold a trace of the day's warmth. No one stretches out fully. You conserve heat by curling inward. Outside, the wind moves across the landscape unhindered by trees in many regions that were already cleared for farming. It finds every crack. It hums softly against the walls. Inside the fire answers back with a pop, a shift, a collapse of embers. This is the soundtrack of survival. Another mainstream historical fact settles quietly into the room. Most medieval homes had no chimneys until later periods. Smoke escaped through a hole in the roof or simply drifted out through gaps in the structure. This meant warmth and discomfort were inseparable. You trade clean air for heat without hesitation. You begin to understand that night is not for activity, it is for endurance. People sleep longer in winter not because they are lazy, but because movement costs heat. You sit, you wait, you listen. Time stretches differently when the sun is gone. There is an unspoken knowledge that dawn will come, but it feels distant. For now the night holds you. Cold presses in from every side, but you are not alone with it. You are surrounded by small strategies, learned behaviours, quiet adjustments that keep people alive through months like this. As the fire settles into a steady rhythm, you feel the story narrowing, focusing. This first night is not about clever tricks yet. It is about awareness, about recognising that cold is not an enemy you defeat, but a condition you live within. And as your breathing slows and your body edges closer to the hearth, you begin to understand how every medieval night began the same way, with acceptance. You do not wake up warmer. If anything, the cold feels sharper now that your body has stopped moving. Night presses in fully, and the shape of cold becomes clearer the longer you sit with it. It is not just low temperature, it is weight, it is patience, it creeps, rather than strikes settling. Into fingers first, then toes, then joints, until you are aware of every place your body bends. You begin to understand that medieval people did not think of cold as a single thing. There was dry cold that cracked skin and made wood groan. There was wet cold that soaked through wool and stayed for hours. England offered both often in the same night. Rain earlier in the day could turn evening chill into something that felt almost alive, clinging and stubborn. A mainstream historical fact quietly anchors itself here. Medieval England had no standardised way to measure temperature. No numbers, no forecasts. Cold was described through experience. Chronicles speak of winters as hard, bitter, cruel or merciless. These words mattered. They told you how careful to be, how much food to save, how long fires might need to burn. You step outside briefly, just long enough to feel the night air fully. The ground is stiff beneath your feet. Mud has hardened into ruts. Grass crunches faintly under pressure. The sky is wide and star-filled, clearer in winter than summer, and that clarity comes with a cost. Clear skies often mean colder nights. You do not know the science, but you know the pattern. Sound behaves differently now. A distant dog bark carries farther. Wind slipping through bare branches makes a thin whispering noise that never quite stops. Even your own movements seem louder, as if the cold amplifies everything. You move carefully, conserving warmth without thinking about it consciously. There is a quirky tidbit that circulates through later writings and oral tradition. Some people believed cold itself could seep into the body and lodge there, causing pain months later. A chill in the bones, they called it. Modern medicine might describe arthritis or chronic inflammation, but the lived experience was the same. Cold nights left marks that did not fade quickly. You return indoors, grateful for even imperfect shelter. The fire is lower now, embers glowing like watchful eyes. Someone stirs them gently, careful not to wake sparks. Wood is precious. You do not waste it chasing momentary comfort. Fires are planned to last, not blaze. Historians still argue whether medieval diets helped people tolerate cold better or worse than modern ones. Heavy breads, fats and stews provided calories that fueled internal heat, but malnutrition was common, especially in poorer households. You feel this tension in the room. Warmth depends not only on fire, but on what you have eaten earlier that day. As the night deepens, people adjust positions almost without speaking. Someone moves closer to the hearth. Someone else shifts to block a draft with their body. Cloaks are pulled tighter. Hoods come up. Layers matter more now than fashion ever could. Clothing is armour against the cold, and every seam counts. You notice how darkness changes behaviour. There is no idle pacing, no unnecessary gestures. Energy is guarded. Even conversation slows, not from boredom but from instinct. Talking opens the mouth, releases heat, dries the throat. Silence is efficient. Another mainstream historical fact slips in quietly. Candles are rare and expensive. Tallow smells unpleasant and burns unevenly. Beeswax is a luxury few can afford. Most nights are lived by firelight, alone shadows jumping along walls as the flames shift. Darkness is not total, but it is deep enough to make you cautious. You sit and listen to the small sounds of survival. A cough, the scrape of a wooden stool, the soft exhale of someone already drifting towards sleep. Sleep itself is different here. It comes in pieces. You rest, wake, adjust, rest again. The night is long and your body knows it. Cold sharpens awareness. You feel fabric against skin. You feel the roughness of wool, the scratch of seams. You become aware of where heat escapes fastest, wrists, ankle, neck. You tuck these places in learning by feel what works and what does not. There is another odd belief that floats through medieval thinking. Some thought cold carried spirits or influences that entered through uncovered skin. Scarves and hoods were not only practical but protective in a symbolic sense. Covering the head mattered especially at night when unseen things were thought to move more freely. You glance toward the door, solid but imperfect. It leaks cold like a slow breath. Someone has stuffed cloth or straw into gaps along the frame, an early form of insulation born from observation rather than theory. People noticed where cold entered and tried to block it piece by piece. Historians still debate how much of medieval cold survival was conscious strategy and how much was habit inherited without question. Did people know why something worked, or did they simply repeat what they were taught? Sitting here wrapped and quiet, it feels like the answer is both. Knowledge lived in the body as much as the mind. Time stretches, the fire dims further. Someone adds a single log carefully placed. Sparks rise briefly, then settle. The room warms just enough to take the edge off, not enough to relax fully. You remain alert even as your eyelids grow heavy. The cold never leaves, it waits, it presses, but you are learning its rhythm now. You understand that surviving medieval nights was not about defeating cold, but about shaping your life around it. And as the night deepens and your breathing slows, the understanding settles in beside you, steady and unhurried. You settle closer to the hearth now because everything in this room quietly orbits it. The fire is not just a feature. It is the heart that everything else listens to. Even when no one is looking at it directly, everyone is aware of its mood. Is it steady? Is it fading? Is it angry and popping too much? Your comfort depends on the answers. The hearth sits low, open, simple. No iron grate, no tidy bricks. Just a shallow stone base where logs and embers glow unevenly. The warmth it gives off is immediate but limited. You feel it on your shins first, then your hands, then your face. The rest of you remains aware of the cold waiting patiently behind. People in medieval England structured their evenings around this fire. Household tasks slowed as the light dimmed. Spinning, mending, quiet work that could be done close to warmth continued a little longer. Anything that required standing away from the hearth was postponed until morning if possible. This was not laziness. It was calculation. Surviving records make something very clear. Firewood was precious. Even in wooded regions, gathering, cutting, drying and storing fuel took time and effort. In areas where forests had thinned, fuel shortages were common. Some households burned peat-dried dung or brush instead of wood. Each burned differently, smelled differently and warmed unevenly. You notice how carefully logs are placed. Not tossed, not stacked randomly. Someone nudges a piece just so opening a channel for air coaxing flame without waste. Fire tending is a learned skill passed down quietly. Children watched adults do this long before they were trusted to try themselves. There is a lesser-known detail tucked into medieval household accounts. Some families banked their fires at night, piling ash over embers to keep them alive until morning. A fire that survived the night saved enormous effort at dawn. Rekindling from scratch was slow and uncertain, especially in damp weather. Losing the fire entirely could turn a cold morning into a crisis. The smoke hangs low, drifting upward only gradually. It stings your eyes if you sit too close for too long. Your throat feels dry, coughing is common, people accepted this as part of life. Clean air was not a concept they could afford to prioritise. Warmth mattered more. Modern researchers have pointed out that constant exposure to smoke likely caused long-term respiratory problems. Medieval people would not have framed it that way. They knew smoke made breathing uncomfortable. They also knew cold could kill. The choice was simple. You shift slightly, rotating your body again, letting warmth reach places that have gone numb. Everyone does this. You never stay still for long. Movement is subtle and slow, almost meditative. No one stretches fully. You keep limbs tucked close, conserving what heat you have built up. An odd belief attaches itself to hearths over time. Fires were thought to have personalities. A fire that sputtered or refused to catch might be blamed on bad fortune, improper behaviour, or unseen influences. Some people spoke softly around the hearth at night, as if loud voices might offend it. Whether symbolic or practical, these habits reinforced attentiveness. The hearth also marked social boundaries. Guests were offered places closest to the fire as a sign of hospitality. Elders and children were kept nearest by default. Status could be read by proximity to warmth. Even in sleep this mattered. Beds or pallets closest to the hearth were most desirable on cold nights. Those beds were simple, wooden frames or straw pallets laid directly on the floor, but placement mattered more than comfort. You feel how the warmth pools unevenly strongest within a certain radius, fading quickly beyond it. Positioning could mean the difference between shivering wakefulness and broken sleep. There is disagreement among historians about how often hearth fires burn through the entire night. Some argue fuel scarcity made this rare, especially among poorer households. Others suggest that even small low fires were kept alive as much as possible because of the danger cold posed to the very young and very old. The truth likely varied by region, wealth and weather. You become aware of how quiet the room grows as the fire settles into embers. The crackling softens, shadows stabilize, people speak less. Night deepens not with drama but with a gradual lowering of energy. Bodies prepare for rest in stages mirroring the fire's slow descent. You smell the fire more clearly now. Wood, smoke, earth, a hint of whatever was cooked earlier. These smells cling to clothing and hair. People carried the hearth with them everywhere they went. It marked them as surely as accents or clothing styles. A practical observation surfaces as you watch the embers. Fire dries the air slightly, making the cold feel sharper on exposed skin but easier to tolerate overall. Damp cold seeps into bones. Dry cold stings but stays nearer the surface. Medieval people noticed this without naming it, adjusting fire use accordingly. Someone rises carefully to add a final piece of fuel, not a log, something smaller, controlled, enough to carry the fire forward without wasting heat or risking sparks. Sparks were dangerous. Thatched roofs and wooden beams did not forgive carelessness. As you settle back again, warmth easing but not disappearing, you understand how central the hearth was to surviving medieval nights. It was warmth, light, protection and rhythm all at once. Without it, the house became a shell. With it, even the coldest night could be endured. Your breathing slows as the fire steadies. The room hums quietly, outside winter waits. Inside the hearth holds its ground. The warmth you gain from the fire always arrives with a cost, and you are breathing that cost in now. Smoke does not politely rise and vanish. It drifts, it curls, it settles low when the air outside grows heavy and cold. Your eyes sting gently at first, then more insistently if you sit too close or too long. You blink often, not thinking much of it, because everyone here does the same. The ceiling above you tells a quiet story. Beams darken to near black, soot layered so thick it softens edges. Over years, even decades, smoke has painted the house from the inside out. This is not neglect, this is evidence of survival. The house has been warm often enough to leave a mark. Accounts from the period make something plain. Smoke-filled rooms were normal. People expected it. Complaints about stinging eyes or sore throats appear occasionally in letters and records, but always as minor annoyances compared to cold. Warmth came first. Comfort followed only if it could. You adjust your position again, angling your head away from the densest haze. People learned where smoke pooled and where air stayed clearer. Taller adults sometimes crouched or sat lower. Children were kept near the floor where air was marginally better, though colder. These adjustments happened without discussion. They were learned early. A curious detail emerges from archaeological studies of medieval homes. Some roofs show patterns of smoke staining that suggest people intentionally guided airflow by adjusting roof openings or hanging cloths. These were crude systems, but they worked enough to matter. Managing smoke became part of managing warmth. Your chest feels tight for a moment, then settles. Coughing is common accepted. A cough does not stop conversation or prompt concern unless it becomes severe. Persistent coughs are simply part of winter life. You notice how people clear their throats quietly, almost politely, as if apologizing to the room. Modern medical researchers have suggested that long-term smoke exposure likely shortened lives or worsened illness. Medieval people would not frame it that way. They knew smoke made breathing harder. They also knew that without fire, breathing at all might not last long. The choice was not theoretical. There is a strange belief recorded in some rural communities that smoke purified the air, that it chased away sickness or harmful influences. Fires were sometimes kept burning during illness, not just for warmth, but because people believed smoke protected the household. Whether symbolic or practical, the belief encouraged keeping the hearth alive. You rub your eyes gently, feeling grit at the corners. Tears come easily in this air. They wash some of the sting away. You do not complain. Complaining wastes breath and warmth. Instead, you shift closer to someone else, sharing the space where air feels slightly clearer. Another thing becomes noticeable. Smell. Everything smells faintly of smoke. Clothing, hair, skin, even food carries it. This smell follows people into churches, markets, and fields. Becomes so familiar that its absence might feel unsettling. Clean air would smell strange. Records from later centuries note that people could often identify someone's household by scent alone. Different fuels produce different smoke. Wood, peat, dung, each left its own signature. Smell became a marker of place and habit woven into identity. You listen to the fire again, noticing how smoke thickens when embers shift or new fuel is added. Sparks rise briefly, then fade. Someone watches carefully or is aware of the balance between flame and suffocation. Too much fuel smothers the fire and fills the room with smoke. Too little lets warmth slip away. There has long been discussion among historians about whether medieval people understood the dangers of smoke or simply endured them. Some evidence suggests awareness. Houses were modified, openings adjusted, fires tended carefully, but danger was relative. Smoke discomfort ranked low compared to hunger, cold, and disease. You notice how night deepens the effect. During the day, doors open, air moves. At night, everything seals up. Warmth is trapped, but so is smoke. The room feels heavier now, thicker. Breathing requires a little more effort. You adapt, slowing your breath, keeping it shallow. Children sleep through this more easily than adults. Their breathing is soft, quick. Elders cough more, their chests rising with effort. This is noticed but not remarked upon. Aging is accepted. Winter is accepted. There is no illusion that comfort can be perfected. A small, often overlooked practice surfaces here. Some households kept herbs near the hearth not only for cooking, but to scent the smoke. Rosemary, juniper, or thyme thrown onto embers could briefly sweeten the air. It did not last long, but it offered a moment of relief, both physical and emotional. You feel drowsy now, not because the air is clean, but because your body is conserving energy. Smoke makes eyelids heavy. Warmth loosens muscles just enough to invite rest. The room grows quieter as people give into that pull. Scholars continue to debate whether smoke exposure contributed to medieval sleep patterns. Did it deepen sleep by dulling the senses or fragment it by irritating lungs and eyes? The evidence is mixed. Sitting here, you suspect it did both depending on the night. You shift one last time, finding a position where warmth and air balance as well as they can. The fire settles again. Smoke thins slightly. The house creaks softly as temperatures change outside. These sounds reassure you. They mean the structure is holding. Breathing becomes rhythmic. In, out, slow, careful. The night does not ask you to be comfortable. It asks you to endure. And as smoke and warmth wrap around you together, inseparable companions, you do exactly that. When it is finally time to sleep, you realize how little bedding is going to help you. There is no soft mattress waiting, no thick quilt promising warmth. What you have instead is a careful arrangement of materials that do their best and no more than that. You lower yourself onto a straw mattress or pallet, listening to it rustle beneath your weight. Straw is not chosen for comfort, it's chosen because it traps air. Air is insulation. Fresh straw works better than old, but replacing it takes labour, so many households tolerate flattened, dusty bedding far longer than ideal. You feel the unevenness immediately. Hips press through, shoulders complain. You are just searching for a position that hurts least and warms most. Surviving household inventories tell us something important. Bedding was one of the most valuable possessions a family owned. Blankets, coverlets, and woolen cloth appear again and again in wills carefully listed and passed down. This was not sentimentality. It was necessity. Warmth at night could not be improvised easily. You pull a wool blanket over yourself. Wool's heavy, coarse, and slightly scratchy, but it holds heat even when damp. That matters in a house where moisture never quite leaves. Linen sheets, if you have them, go underneath. Linen feels cold at first touch, shocking. Almost, but it wicks moisture away from skin, which helps in the long run. There is a lesser-known habit, recorded in some regions. People sometimes warmed bedding near the fire before sleep, draping blankets close enough to absorb heat without scorching. It did not last long once you lay down, but those first few minutes of warmth could make falling asleep easier. You notice how you do not stretch out fully. That would expose too much surface area to the cold. Instead, you curl slightly, knees bent, shoulders rounded. This posture is not taught. It is learned by every cold night that came before. Your body remembers what works. Another thing becomes clear. You sleep dressed, not in night clothes, but in the same layers you wore through the evening. Tunics, hose, cloaks pulled close. Removing clothing would mean losing heat you cannot easily regain. Even shoes are sometimes kept on, especially for children. Records from monasteries and households suggest that head coverings were often worn to bed. Caps, hoods, or scarves kept precious warmth from escaping. People noticed that uncovered heads led to colder nights' headaches and restless sleep. Covering the head became routine, not superstition. There is disagreement among researchers about how effective medieval bedding really was. Some argue that straw mattresses and wool blankets offered more insulation than we imagine. Others point out that without raised beds or proper underlayers, heat loss to the ground would have been severe. Sitting here, pressed close to the floor, you suspect both are true. The ground itself is a problem. Earth floors draw heat downward relentlessly. Even wooden floors can feel like ice after midnight. To counter this, people layered rushes, straw, and sometimes old cloth beneath sleeping areas. These layers flattened quickly, but every bit helped. A curious belief floats up from folklore. Some thought sleeping too close to the ground invited illness and were carried by cold air. Raised beds were preferred when possible, not just for status, but for perceived health. Being higher meant being warmer, safer, and less vulnerable to night chills. You shift again, tucking the blanket under your chin, then pulling it tighter around your shoulders. Small gaps matter. A draft across the neck can wake you instantly. You block it with fabric, learning through repetition how to seal yourself in. Sleep comes unevenly. You drift, wake, adjust, drift again. The cold never fully releases you, but it loosens its grip enough to allow rest. Your breathing slows. Muscles relax just a little. Outside, the wind continues its quiet work. An overlooked detail from medieval letters appears here. People often shared bedding not just for warmth, but because it made blankets more effective. One blanket over two bodies trapped heat better than two blankets over two separate sleepers. Physics without equations learned through cold nights. Scholars still debate how much sleep medieval people actually got in winter. Long nights suggest plenty of opportunity, but cold smoke and discomfort likely fragmented rest. What seems certain is that sleep was lighter, more flexible and more responsive to surroundings. You become aware of sounds again. Straw shifting as someone nearby turns. A quiet cough. The fire settling lower. These sounds are not disruptive, they are reassurance. They mean others are enduring the same night. Your feet feel coldest. You rub them together under the blanket, generating a little heat. It works briefly. Then the cold creeps back. You accept it. Fighting it wastes energy. As your thoughts slow, you understand that medieval bedding was not about softness or luxury. It was about creating a fragile pocket of warmth in a hostile environment. It did not defeat the cold. It negotiated with it. Eventually, exhaustion does what bedding cannot. Your body lets go, surrendering to shallow sleep. Wrapped in wool dressed for the day to come, you rest as people have rested for centuries. Not comfortably, but sufficiently. As the night deepens, you realize you are not meant to face it alone. Warmth here is shared. It is passed quietly from body to body, absorbed and returned in small practical ways. Sleeping together is not about intimacy or comfort in the modern sense. It is about survival, plain and simple. You feel another presence beside you close enough that your shoulders touch. A child, perhaps, or a sibling, or simply another member of the household assigned to the same sleeping space. Bodies pressed together carefully, finding arrangements that allow everyone to breathe while trapping as much heat as possible. No one spreads out. Elbows tuck in. Knees bend. Every inch matters. Old household records and manorial accounts hint at how common shared sleeping arrangements were. Beds were expensive. Space was limited. Even families with some means often slept several people to a bed. For poorer households, everyone might share a single sleeping area near the hearth. Privacy was rare. Warmth was not. You notice how quickly shared heat changes the feeling of the night, where the cold pressed sharply against your side before it softens now. Another person's warmth seeps through layers of wool and linen, subtle but unmistakable. It does not make you comfortable. It makes you less cold. That difference is everything. Animals add to this equation in ways that would surprise modern sensibilities. A dog curls near your feet, its breath slow and steady. In some homes, cats sleep close to bodies drawn by warmth as much as by habit. In rural settings, livestock might be housed just beyond a thin wall, their combined heat seeping through timber and earth. The smell is strong, the noise occasional, the warmth undeniable. A detail that rarely makes textbook surfaces here. Medieval people often described warmth as something that moved. Heat flowed from one body to another, from animals to humans, from fire to floor. Sharing space meant sharing this movement. Sleeping alone was colder, riskier, and often avoided when possible. You become aware of the sounds of shared sleep. Breathing overlaps. Someone sighs. Someone shifts and settles again. These sounds are not irritating, they are reassuring. Silence would feel wrong, even dangerous. Sound means life. It means no one has slipped too far into cold stillness. There is no firm agreement among modern researchers about how people negotiated personal boundaries in such conditions. Some suggest constant closeness reduced sensitivity to crowding. Others argue that tension and discomfort were common but tolerated. Lying here half asleep, you suspect both were true depending on the night and the people involved. You adjust your blanket, pulling it wider so it covers more than just you. Sharing blankets is common. One heavy wool coverlet draped over multiple bodies traps heat far more effectively than thinner layers used separately. This is noticed early in life and rarely questioned later. An unexpected practice turns up in a few regional accounts. In especially cold spells, people sometimes rearrange sleeping groups to maximize warmth, placing children between adults or clustering the most vulnerable together. This was done quietly without ceremony, guided by instinct rather than instruction. You feel the warmth build slowly, not enough to relax completely, but enough to dull the sharpest edge of cold. Muscles loosen a little. Breathing deepens. Sleep comes more easily when you are not fighting the night alone. At the same time, closeness brings its own challenges. Movement is restricted. If one person wakes and shifts, others feel it immediately. Sleep becomes a shared rhythm, light and easily disturbed. But waking briefly is better than freezing deeply. Some specialists read shared sleeping as a social norm reinforced by necessity, while others push back, noting that complaints about crowded sleeping spaces appear occasionally in personal writings. Comfort was relative. Endurance was universal. You notice how careful everyone is not to kick or shove. Even half asleep, people protect the fragile balance of warmth. A limb pushed away is warmth lost. A blanket pulled too far exposes skin to drafts. Cooperation happens without discussion. The night continues outside, wind brushing against walls, cold waiting patiently. Inside, bodies form a small island of heat. Not enough to banish winter, but enough to survive it. You feel your thoughts slow as shared warmth does its quiet work. As sleep settles more firmly now, you understand that medieval nights were not endured alone. They were faced together, shoulder to shoulder, breath to breath, and in that closeness warmth became something communal, fragile, and deeply human. You never truly undress for bed. That idea belongs to a warmer future. Here, clothing is not something you remove at night. It is something you rearrange. Every layer you keep on is a small barrier between your skin and the cold that never stops searching for openings. You feel the weight of your clothes as you settle again. A wool tunic still wrapped around your torso. Hose pulled up tight over your legs. A cloak folded and drawn close like an extra blanket. The fabric smells faintly of smoke and wear. It scratches in places. None of that matters. What matters is that it holds heat. Surviving wardrobe lists from the period quietly reveal how few garments most people owned. A single good tunic might be worn daily, patched repeatedly, and slept in every night for years. Clothing was not seasonal in the modern sense. You layered what you had, regardless of month, adjusting thickness rather than changing outfits. You notice how cuffs are pulled down over hands, how collars are tugged higher around the neck. Exposed skin feels risky now. The cold finds it immediately, wrists, ankles, throat. These places are guarded instinctively. Even half asleep, your body protects them. Head coverings matter more than you might expect. Caps, hoods, scarves, anything that can be pulled over the ears. Geo stays on through the night. People noticed long ago that uncovered heads led to colder sleep and waking headaches. Keeping the head warm became habit, not advice. There is a small but telling detail found in some medieval illustrations. Sleepers are often shown wearing their day clothes, sometimes with belts loosened but not removed. Belts help keep fabric close to the body, reducing drafts inside clothing. Comfort yields to function. You adjust your layers, tucking fabric beneath you, sealing gaps where cold air might slip in. This takes practice. Too tight and movement becomes uncomfortable. Too loose and warmth escapes. The balance is learned slowly, night after night. One odd custom appears in a few household descriptions. Some people slept with an extra garment laid across the chest or stomach, not worn, just placed. This added weight and warmth without restricting limbs. A simple solution discovered without theory. You feel the stiffness in your joints ease slightly as your body heat builds inside the layers. Wool traps air. Air warms. The process is slow but reliable. Linen beneath keeps sweat away from skin, preventing dampness that would steal heat later. These materials work together even if no one explains why. Interpretations still diverge on how comfortable this actually felt. Some modern observers imagine constant misery. Others point out that people accustomed to these conditions likely found a baseline of tolerable warmth. Sitting here, you feel neither comfortable nor desperate. You feel managed. Shoes remain on your feet. Leather is not warm, but it blocks drafts from the floor. Sometimes soft boots or extra wrappings are used instead. Feet lose heat quickly, and once cold, they're difficult to warm again. Keeping them covered matters more than elegance. You notice how movement quiets as people prepare to sleep fully. Layers settle. Fabric stops rustling. Everyone finds a position that allows warmth to build without strain. You curl slightly again, knees bent, shoulders rounded. Clothing folds with you, creating pockets of trapped air. A detail tucked into later winter accounts suggests that some people tightened garments deliberately before sleep, cinching cords or ties to reduce airflow inside clothing. This was not about style. It was about survival through long hours of stillness. There is no firm consensus among historians on how often people changed or cleaned sleeping clothes in winter. Washing required water and exposure to cold, both risky. Many likely slept in the same garments for days or weeks, accepting smell and stiffness as part of the season. You feel the fabric warm slowly against your skin. The scratchiness fades as sensation dulls. Your breathing evens out. Clothing becomes less noticeable, merging into the background of sensation along with smoke, straw, and shared warmth. An overlooked advantage of sleeping dressed becomes clear when someone stirs nearby. If you need to rise suddenly to tend the fire, soothe a child, or respond to noise, you're already prepared. No shivering pause, no scrambling for layers. Readiness is built into rest. Outside, the night holds steady. Inside, the small island of warmth created by bodies, fire, and fabric remains fragile but intact. You are wrapped in everything you own that can help you endure until morning. As sleep draws closer, you understand that medieval clothing was never just about appearance. It was shelter you carried on your body. And on nights like this, when the cold presses hardest, that shelter makes the difference between restless endurance and the possibility of rest. Your thoughts soften. Layers hold, the cold waits, and you drift dressed for both night and bull dawn. The night has a sound now, and once you notice it, you cannot unhear it. Cold is quiet, but winter is not. It carries noises, farther stretches them, thinner, sharpens their edges. You lie still and listen because listening costs less energy than moving. The wind is the loudest presence. It slides along the walls, testing seams and corners, sighing through gaps stuffed with straw and cloth. Sometimes it rises, suddenly rattling shutters or brushing the thatch with a dry, restless hand. Other times it fades to a whisper so soft you almost miss it. Each change pulls you closer to waking. Wood responds to cold with its own language. Beams creak as temperatures drop, roof timbers shift. Floorboards complain quietly under pressure. These sounds are familiar, even comforting. They mean the house is reacting, not failing. Silence would feel worse. You hear animals long before you see them. A horse shifting weight in a nearby stall, a cow breathing deeply through its nose, a dog sighing as it curls tighter against warmth. These sounds blend into the background, steady and grounding. Livestock noises at night reassure people that nothing unexpected has happened. Surviving village accounts suggest that sudden silence from animals was taken seriously. It could signal a predator illness or intruder. On winter nights when visibility vanished early, hearing mattered more than sight. You listen not out of fear but habit. Closer sounds register too. Someone clears their throat. Straw rustles as a sleeper turns. A child murmurs briefly then settles. These small noises confirm presence. They anchor you in the room in the shared task of getting through the night. There is a detail often overlooked in discussions of medieval life. Nighttime was rarely completely quiet. Without modern insulation, every sound passed freely through thin walls and open rafters. You hear neighbours moving, coughing, tending fires of their own. Villages breathe together after dark. A faint crackle from the hearth punctuates the listening. Embers shift. Ash collapses. Each small sound is assessed automatically. Is the fire safe? Is it fading too quickly? Does it need attention? Even half asleep, part of you stays alert. Some later writers mention that winter sound carried farther because cold air felt sharper to the ear. While the explanation was not scientific, the observation was accurate. People learned which noises belonged to the season and which did not. There is still discussion among specialists about how constant sound affected medieval sleep. Some argue that people slept through noise easily because it was familiar. Others suggest that lighter segmented sleep patterns develop partly because of environmental interruptions. Lying here, drifting in and out, you experience both at once. Outside something moves in the distance, maybe a fox, maybe a person crossing frozen ground. Footsteps sound different in winter, crisper, more deliberate. You do not rise, you listen until the sound fades or resolves itself. Inside, breathing becomes the dominant rhythm. Several people inhale and exhale at different paces, creating a soft, uneven chorus. It is oddly soothing. You match your breath to it without thinking, letting your body settle into the shared tempo. An odd belief circulated in some places that certain sounds at night carried meaning. Whistling wind foretold hard weather. Sudden cracks in wood warned of deeper cold to come. Whether believed literally or not, these interpretations kept people attentive to their environment. You notice how darkness deepens the importance of sound. Without light ears take over, you map the room by noise alone. Fire here, breathe in the air, animals beyond the wall, wind everywhere. The cold sharpens this awareness. Every sound feels closer, more personal. It keeps you from sinking fully into unconsciousness. Instead, you hover in a light sleep, ready to wake if something changes. Eventually, familiarity dulls alertness. The same sounds repeat. Wind, wood, breath, fire. Nothing new intrudes. Your body accepts the pattern and loosens its grip on wakefulness. As sleep draws you under again, you realize that medieval nights were not silent battles against cold. They were long listening sessions where sound confirmed safety, warned of danger, and filled the dark with evidence of life continuing. Wrapped in layers, surrounded by familiar noises, you let those sounds carry you forward deeper into rest while winter murmurs steadily just beyond the walls. You feel hunger differently at night in winter. It is not the sharp, impatient kind that asks to be answered immediately. It is deeper, slower, a steady pull that reminds you heat does not come only from fire. It comes from inside the body too. What you ate earlier matters now hours later as the cold presses in. Evening seals in medieval England were built with this in mind, whether people spoke about it or not. Heavier foods lingered. Thick bread dense with grain. Pottage made from peas, beans or barley cooked long enough to soften everything into warmth. Fat, when available, was prized not for flavour alone but for staying power. You feel it working quietly as you lie still. Household accounts from towns and villages show that winter diets shifted subtly. Fresh greens faded. Preserved foods took over. Salted meat, dried fish, hard cheese. These were not exciting, but they burned slowly in the body, releasing energy through the night. Eating lightly before bed in winter would have been unthinkable if you could avoid it. You remember the warmth that spread through you earlier after supper, not dramatic but noticeable. That warmth has not vanished. It has retreated inward, feeding muscles and organs, giving your body something to work with as it fights the cold. Without it, sleep would be shorter and shivering more constant. There is a small but telling habit recorded in some household description. People often saved a portion of food specifically for late evening, even if it was just bread dipped in broth. This was not indulgence, it was strategy. Going to bed hungry in winter made the night feel longer and colder. Warm drinks played their part too. Not tea or coffee, which had not arrived yet, but ale, thin and weak by modern standards. Heated slightly, it provided liquid warmth and calories together. You can still feel the memory of that warmth lingering in your chest. An unexpected belief surfaces in a few sources. Some thought certain foods literally produced more internal heat than others. Onions, garlic and spices were sometimes credited with warming the blood. Whether the effect was physical or psychological, these foods appeared often in winter cooking when available. There is still disagreement among modern scholars about how well medieval people understood nutrition in a practical sense. They lacked biochemical knowledge, but they observed cause and effect closely. Heavy meals made nights more bearable, skipping them made cold feel sharper. That was knowledge enough. You shift slightly, feeling your stomach settle. Digestion itself produces heat. It is subtle, but in a cold house, even subtle warmth counts. This is why overeating before bed was not discouraged in winter the way it might be later. Resting digestion was not the goal. Warm survival was. Food smells linger faintly in the air. Cooked grain, smoke, fat. These smells mix with wool and straw, creating an atmosphere that feels dense and grounding. It reminds you that effort has already been spent today to prepare for this night. Some accounts mention people waking briefly in the middle of the night to eat again, especially during extreme cold. A crust of bread, a sip of ale. This segmented sleep allowed bodies to refuel when warmth dipped too low. It was not considered strange. It was responsive living. Interpretations vary on how common this practice was. Some researchers see it as rare, tied to hardship or illness. Others suggest it may have been widespread during severe winters. Lying here half asleep, you can imagine why it would help. Your body feels heavier, now grounded by food and layers. Shivering has not started. That alone feels like success. You focus on the slow rhythm of breathing, letting digestion and warmth do their quiet work together. Outside, the cold continues unchanged. Inside, the balance holds for now. Fire, clothing, shared bodies, and food form a fragile system. Move one piece and the dim night becomes harder. As sleep deepens again, you understand that medieval survival did not rely on a single solution. It was a web of small decisions repeated daily. What you ate mattered as much as where you slept. Warmth was planned hours in advance, carried forward patiently into the dark. Your thoughts drift full and slow. The night stretches on, but you are prepared. And with that steady inner warmth still flickering, you let yourself rest again, trusting that the food you shared earlier will carry you a little farther toward morning. The drink warms you quickly, but it never stays long. You feel it spread through your chest and limbs in a soft wave, loosening muscles and dulling the sharpest edge of cold. For a few minutes, maybe longer, if you sip slowly, the night feels more forgiving. Then the warmth thins, slipping away almost as quietly as it arrived. Ali is part of nearly every winter evening. Not the strong kind you might imagine, but small beer, brewed weak enough to drink daily. Clean water is unreliable, especially in towns, and fermentation makes ale safer. It also provides calories which matter more now than taste. You drink not to escape the cold, but to manage it. People sometimes warm their ale near the hearth, careful not to let it boil. The cup feels good in your hands first, fingers thaw slightly, then the heat reaches your throat, your stomach. It is comforting in a simple, immediate way. Household records and tavern regulations show how common this practice was. Ale allowances appear alongside bread rations in some places. It was not luxury, it was fuel. Even children drank diluted versions, especially in winter. There is a curious contradiction you notice quickly. The drink makes you feel warmer, but it also makes you more vulnerable to cold later. Alcohol opens blood vessels near the skin, bringing warmth to the surface, but letting heat escape faster. People did not know the mechanism, but they knew the pattern. Drink too much and the cold returns stronger. That knowledge shows up indirectly in behaviour. Ale is sipped, not swallowed quickly. It is taken with food. It is used to take the edge off, not to replace other protection. Drunkenness in winter is dangerous. Losing awareness means losing heat. An odd bit of advice appears in a few later winter sermons. People were warned not to rely on drink to keep warm through the night, as it could lead to deeper chill and illness. Moral language wrapped around practical observation, as it often did. Mead and wine appear too, though less often for most people. Mead is sweeter, heavier, warming in a different way. Wine is diluted and expensive, all serve the same purpose: brief comfort, shared ritual, a pause in the long cold evening. There is no clear agreement among modern researchers on how much alcohol actually helped people tolerate winter nights. Some suggest the psychological comfort mattered as much as any physical effect. Others argue the risks outweighed the benefits. Sitting here feeling the warmth fade, you understand why moderation became habit. You set the cup aside, careful not to spill. Liquid on the floor would chill the air and make footing dangerous. Everything in winter demands attention. Even small mistakes linger. The warmth from the drink leaves behind a softness in your muscles. That helps. Tension costs energy. Relaxation conserves it. You adjust your position again, letting your body settle into layers and shared heat. The smell of ale mixes with smoke and wool. It is a familiar scent tied to evening and rest. Taverns are warmer places, but home offers something they cannot. Shelter through the entire night, fire watched carefully, people you trust close by. Some accounts mention people waking thirstier on cold nights. Dry air from the fire pulls moisture away. Ale and water are kept nearby for that reason. Rising to drink briefly is better than waking with a dry throat and restless limbs. Debate continues among historians about how much winter drinking shaped social life. Did it draw people together or merely accompany existing routines? The answer likely shifts by place and circumstance. In the quiet of a home, the drink feels less social and more practical. You feel sleep returning heavier now. The brief warmth has done its work, not by lasting but by easing you into rest. The night remains cold unchanged, but you are not fighting it alone or unprepared. As your breathing slows again, you accept the drink for what it is, a small tool, a passing comfort, one more thread in the fragile fabric that carries you through the longest hours. The cup cools, the fire glows low, and you drift back into sleep knowing warmth here is never permanent, only managed moment by moment until morning. The fire is lower now, more memory than flame, and your attention drifts back to it again and again. Keeping it alive through the night is a quiet responsibility shared, but never fully handed off. You do not want a blaze, you want endurance, a fire that lasts until dawn without waking the house in panic. Someone rises carefully, moving slowly so as not to disturb the fragile balance of warmth and sleep. You hear the soft scrape of wood, the hush of ash being shifted. Embers glow brighter for a moment like eyes opening, then settle back. The air changes slightly. Warmer, drier, still smoky. Household instructions passed down orally made this skill essential. A poorly banked fire died before morning. A badly fed one flared, throwing sparks that could catch thatch or dry timber. Winter nights were not forgiving of mistakes. Fire tending was learned young, practiced, often respected quietly. You notice how fuel choices change at this hour. No large logs, those burn too fast. Instead, smaller pieces or materials that smoulder rather than flame. Peat, when available, was valued for this. It burned slowly, steadily though, with a heavy smell. Charcoal, rarer in homes, offered long-lasting heat but required preparation and cost. There is a detail that appears in several regional customs. Some families covered their embers with a layer of ash before sleeping, insulating the heat and slowing combustion. In the morning, the ash would be brushed aside and the fire coaxed back to life. This simple act saved time, fuel, and fingers numbed by cold dawn air. You think about what it would mean to lose the fire completely. Morning would begin colder. Rekindling would require sparks dry tinder patience. In damp weather it might fail entirely. Losing the fire meant losing the centre of the house for hours. People did not take that risk lightly. As you lie there, you sense how even sleep remains partially alert. The crackle of embers is monitored subconsciously. A sudden pop or collapse would wake someone immediately. Fire safety is not a rule here. It is instinct. Some surviving accounts describe small fires kept in metal or ceramic containers that could be moved closer to sleeping areas. These were dangerous, but in extreme cold risk was weighed differently. Warmth near the body could mean the difference between rest and misery. There is disagreement among historians about how widespread these portable heat sources were. Some argue they were rare and risky. Others point to evidence of their use in specific regions or among certain trades. What seems clear is that people experimented constantly adapting tools to conditions. You smell the fire change as it settles deeper into embers. Less smoke now, more of a dry mineral scent. Ash has its own smell, softer than burning wood. The room grows quieter as the fire's voice lowers. You pull your blanket tighter again instinctively, responding to the slight dip in heat. Everyone does. Small movements ripple through the sleeping group as bodies adjust ceiling gaps, sharing warmth more deliberately. A lesser-known practice shows up in a few winter descriptions. People sometimes placed heated stones near sleeping areas wrapped in cloth to prevent burns. These stones held warmth for hours. They cooled slowly, offering a gentle, steady heat through the coldest part of the night. The risk was obvious. Stones too hot could scorch fabric or skin. Stones too cool were useless. Knowing the difference came from experience, not instruction. Those who learned it passed it on carefully. You feel the night deepen further. Outside, the cold likely grows sharper just before dawn. Inside, the fire holds barely like a promise, whispered rather than spoken. You trust it because you must. Your breathing slows again. The house settles around you. Fire fabric and shared presence form a small circle of protection against the vast cold pressing in from every side. As sleep takes you once more, you understand that keeping the fire alive was never just a task. It was an act of faith in the morning. A belief that warmth, though fragile, could be carried forward through the darkest hours if tended patiently. And so you rest, trusting embers ash and careful hands to guard the night until light returns. You smell them before you fully register them. Warm, earthy, alive. Animals share the night with you whether you invited them or not. In winter, their presence shifts from nuisance to resource. Heat is heat, and bodies give it off freely. Just beyond the wall, a cow exhales slowly each breath, though a cloud you can almost feel. The wall between you is thick but imperfect. Warmth seeps through it, subtle but real. In smaller dwellings, animals are closer still. A goat tethered near the door. Chickens roosting overhead. A pig sleeping heavily in a corner. This is not chaos. It is arrangement. Rural household layouts reveal how common this was. Byre houses where people and livestock shared the same structure appear again and again in records and excavations. Humans lived on one side, animals on the other. A single wall separated them. That wall did double duty, holding heat and marking space. You wrinkle your nose at the smell. It is strong, layered with hay dung and animal breath. But smell fades with familiarity. Cold does not. People learned quickly which discomfort mattered more. The animals themselves seem to understand the arrangement. They settle when night falls, conserving energy the way you do. Their bodies radiate warmth steadily without effort. Horses shift occasionally. Cows breathe deeply. Sheep huddle together, wool thick and insulating. An odd solution appears in some household descriptions. During extreme cold, smaller animals were sometimes brought even closer to sleeping spaces. Dogs were encouraged to curl near feet. Cats found their way under blankets. Their presence was welcome, not scolded. There is no single explanation agreed upon for how widespread this practice was. Some sources suggest it was common only among the poorest. Others point out that even wealthier rural households valued animal heat, especially during hard winters. What is clear is that boundaries softened when survival was at stake. You listen to the animal sounds, now slow and rhythmic. They blend with human breathing, fire, embers, and wind. The night feels fuller, less empty. These sounds reassure you. Animals alive and calm mean no predator has come close. A small but telling detail surfaces in winter accounts. People noticed nights felt colder when animals were absent or sick. Their heat mattered enough to be felt. Losing livestock in winter was not only an economic blow, it made the house colder literally and emotionally. You adjust your position slightly, pulling your blanket tighter as a draft slips through the wall. Someone has stuffed straw into the gap, but it is never perfect. The warmth from animals helps soften these failures. It fills spaces fire cannot reach. Modern readers sometimes recoil at the idea of sharing space with livestock. Medieval people did not frame it that way. Animals were part of the household economy and daily rhythm. Keeping them close at night protected them from theft predators and cold while benefiting humans in return. There is still uncertainty among researchers about how people managed hygiene in these shared spaces. Floors were layered with straw and rushes changed as needed. Smell was tolerated. Illness was a concern, but cold posed a more immediate threat. Choices were made accordingly. You notice how the animals rest deeply unbothered by cold the way humans are. Their insulation works better. Wool-hide fat, humans borrowed that warmth by proximity rather than design. As the night stretches on, the shared space feels oddly balanced. Human and animal needs overlap. Warmth circulates slowly, quietly. The house becomes a single living system breathing together against the cold. Your thoughts soften again as you drift. The sounds of animals become part of your sleep, steady and grounding. Their warmth presses gently through walls and floors unnoticed until it is gone. In this arrangement, survival feels communal, not just between people but across species. And as winter holds its grip outside you, rest inside a structure warmed by fire, fabric, bodies, and the quiet presence of animals enduring the night with you. By now, the cold is no longer a shock. It has settled into you, found its familiar places, and made itself known there. Fingers stiffen first, then toes. Joints follow, especially knees and hips that have worked all day and now resent the stillness. You feel it as a dull ache, rather than pain, a reminder rather than a warning. People in medieval England spoke about the cold as something that lived in the body. It crept into bones. It lodged in the back. It made movement slower the next morning. This was not metaphor to them, it was observation. Winter nights left marks you carried forward into the day. You stretch slightly carefully, not wanting to expose too much skin. Movement helps, but only in moderation. Too much and you lose the heat you have built. Too little and stiffness deepens. You find the middle ground through experience as shifting just enough to keep blood moving. Old medical writings from the period describe cold as a cause of imbalance. Too much chill was believed to thicken bodily fluids, slow circulation, and invite illness. Treatments focused on restoring warmth through food, fire, and rest. While the language was different, the lived reality aligns closely with what you feel now. You rub your hands together under the blanket, generating friction, coaxing warmth back into fingers that have gone numb. It works briefly, then the cold presses again. This back and forth continues all night. It is tiring but familiar. A small curious practice appears in some household notes. People sometimes slept with hands tucked into the crook of the elbow or pressed against the chest to keep them warm. Gloves were not common sleeping wear. Bodies substituted for fabric. Feet are the hardest to manage. Once cold, they resist warming. You press them together, then draw them closer to your body. Someone nearby does the same. Shared warmth helps, but only so much. Cold floors pull heat relentlessly downward. There is disagreement among modern readers about how much pain people simply accepted as normal. Chronic ache, stiffness, and numbness appear frequently in descriptions of daily life. Winter nights likely worsened all of it. But expectation shapes perception. What you expect to endure feels different than what you expect to avoid. You notice how breathing changes when you're cold. Shallow, controlled. Deep breaths release warmth too quickly. People learned this without instruction. Even in sleep, breathing stays careful. An odd belief surfaces in later folklore. Some thought sleeping on certain sides of the body reduced cold-related pain. Others swore by positioning the spine toward the hearth even at a distance. These ideas persisted because sometimes they seemed to work. The fire gives off little warmth, now mostly presence. Its light is gone, replaced by a faint glow beneath ash. The room feels heavier. Cold settles lower, closer to the floor, pooling around ankles and calves. Those sleeping higher on raised beds fare slightly better. Records from larger households suggest raised beds were prized in winter, not just for status but for warmth. Elevation mattered. Cold air sank, warmth hovered higher. Those few inches could change how the night felt. You feel the ache in your lower back ease slightly as your body adjusts again. Muscles release, then tense, then release. Sleep remains shallow, but it comes in waves. You ride them when you can. There is still no clear picture of how people differentiated between normal winter discomfort and true illness. Fever, persistent pain, and weakness raised concern. Ordinary cold aches did not. They were part of the season, endured without comment. You listen to breathing around you, slow and uneven. Others feel the same stiffness, the same dull cold. No one complains. Complaints would change nothing. Instead, bodies adapt quietly. As the night edges closer to its coldest hour just before dawn, you feel it press hardest. Joints protest. Fingers curl inward. You tuck them deeper, trusting layers and shared warmth to carry you through. Eventually, exhaustion smooths the edges of sensation. Ache fades into background. Cold becomes a steady presence rather than an active force. You rest not because you are warm, but because your body has learned how to wait. And so you lie there, stiff but breathing cold, but enduring, knowing this feeling is temporary. Morning will come, movement will return, and until then your body does what medieval bodies learn to do best. It holds on. Children are closer to the warmth than anyone else, and you notice this almost immediately. They are tucked in tight, placed deliberately where heat gathers most reliably. Near the hearth, between adults, wrapped in layers that seem excessive until you remember how small bodies lose warmth faster than large ones. You hear a child breathe in sleep, quick and shallow, a rhythm different from the adults around them. Smaller chests cool more quickly. Everyone here knows this without needing to say it aloud. It is quiet, practical and constant. Household guidance passed between generations emphasized this placement. The youngest slept in the safest spots where warmth was least likely to fail. Even in crowded rooms, space was rearranged nightly to protect them. A sleeping child was not simply resting. They were being guarded against the cold. You see how clothing is adjusted for them. Extra layers pulled up, sleeves tucked in, caps secured over ears, a blanket folded one more time than seems necessary. Children rarely slept uncovered even briefly. Adults would wake to adjust bedding if a child shifted and exposed skin to the air. A detail from parish records hints at why this mattered so much. Winter mortality was highest among the very young and the very old. Cold nights weakened bodies already struggling to regulate temperature. Protecting children at night was an unspoken priority because the risk was known even if the mechanisms were not. You notice how adults remain half alert even in sleep when children are present. A whimper stirs someone immediately. A cough draws a hand to a forehead, checking warmth by touch. Care happens without full waking instinct layered over habit. An unusual practice appears in some family accounts. Infants were sometimes wrapped and placed in shallow baskets or cradles near the hearth rather than in beds. This kept them off the cold floor and closer to warmth while still allowing adults to sleep nearby. It was not comfort-focused, it was survival-focused. There is no single view among historians about how effective these methods were. Some suggest many infants still suffered from cold-related illness despite care. Others note that these strategies likely saved lives that would otherwise have been lost. The truth rests somewhere between effort and uncertainty. You hear a child stir and then settle again as an adult shifts slightly, blocking a draft with their body. This kind of adjustment happens dozens of times a night, often without memory in the morning. Warmth is maintained through constant small corrections. Nighttime fears are different for children. Darkness amplifies cold, cold amplifies fear. Adults understand this and keep children close not only for warmth, but for reassurance. Familiar breathing, a hand nearby, a shared blanket. These things matter. A small superstition surfaces here. Some believed cold air at night carried illness that could enter through a child's mouth while sleeping. Scarves or cloths were sometimes draped loosely near the face, not covering it but symbolically guarding against intrusion. Whether symbolic or practical, the intention was protection. You feel how the room organises itself around this care. Children are central, adults form a ring. Warmth radiates inward and outward in layers. The arrangement feels deliberate even if no one planned it consciously. Records from later periods show that winter births were especially dangerous. Newborns faced immediate exposure to cold air and damp surroundings. Keeping them warm through the first nights was critical. Fires burned longer. Bedding doubled. Adults slept lighter. As the night deepens, again children sleep more deeply than anyone else. their bodies finally surrendering to warmth and exhaustion. Adults remain aware even as they rest. Protection does not pause at night. You understand now that medieval survival was not only about enduring cold personally, it was about shaping space and behaviour to protect those most vulnerable. Warmth was shared strategically, deliberately, and with care. And as you drift again toward shallow sleep, you feel that care around you. The quiet vigilance, the constant adjustments, the unspoken understanding that if children made it through the night, the effort had been worth it. Stone does not care whether you are cold. You learn that quickly in places built for prayer rather than comfort. The walls around you now are thick and immovable pale, in the firelight rising higher than any cottage wall ever would. They hold the cold the way water holds memory. Once it settles in, it stays. You are inside a religious house where the rules of warmth bend toward discipline instead of convenience. Monks and nuns live here, and winter nights are endured with a kind of quiet stubbornness. Fires exist, but sparingly. Comfort is not the goal. Order is. The floor beneath you is stone. No straw, no rutches. Cold travels upward through it without resistance. Even layered habits and wool cannot fully block it. You feel it creep into feet and calves first, then slowly claim the rest of the body as stillness stretches on. Daily schedules preserved in monastic rules show how carefully life was structured around prayer and work even in winter. Rising before dawn was expected. Night offices pulled people from sleep into unheated spaces where breath clouded the air. This was not considered cruelty. It was devotion. You notice how posture becomes part of warmth management here. Kneeling keeps bodies moving slightly. Standing too long invites numbness. Sitting presses cold into joints. Movement is restrained but constant enough to keep blood flowing without breaking silence. There is a strange tension between belief and biology that settles in your bones. Spiritual strength is praised, but physical limits remain. Some houses quietly bent rules during harsh winters, allowing extra fires or warmer sleeping arrangements. Others held firm, seeing endurance as part of the calling. Written complaints appear occasionally in letters between religious houses, cold fingers struggling to turn pages, ink freezing in wells, breath-stiffening lips during long chants. These were not expressions of doubt, but acknowledgements of difficulty. Sleeping arrangements are simple. Narrow beds, thin bedding, often no shared sleeping for warmth, as a communal closeness carried different meanings here. Solitude mattered. Cold was faced individually even when shared spaces existed. Yet even here small concessions appear. Extra socks knitted quietly, hoods pulled lower than regulation specified. Sleeves lengthened over years of wear. Rules existed, but bodies negotiated with them nightly. You sense how silence amplifies cold. Without conversation, without the movement of ordinary life, the night stretches longer. Listening becomes inward. Breath, heartbeat, the faint sound of fabric shifting. Cold sharpens awareness of the self. A curious detail emerges from later accounts. Some monks slept with manuscripts or wooden boards tucked under blanket, believing these objects helped retain warmth. Whether that was true or simply comforting the practice lingered in certain houses. There is no settled view among historians about how much winter hardship affected religious life. Some argue it strengthened commitment. Others suggest it contributed to illness and shortened lives. The records do not speak with one voice. You stand again for prayer joints protesting quietly. The cold feels heavier here, less softened by shared bodies or animals. But there is also a sense of control. The environment is harsh but predictable. Routine creates its own shelter. As the night moves on, the stone remains cold unchanged. Bodies adapt around it. Breath fogs, muscles tighten, then loosen. Earth does not warm the room, but it gives shape to the night. Eventually rest returns in short intervals. Sleep broken by the bells, by prayer, by the need to move and feel your limbs again. The cold never leaves, but it becomes part of the rhythm woven into devotion. When dawn finally approaches, pale light seeping into narrow windows, you understand something essential. Medieval survival took many forms. In some places, warmth was gathered and shared. In others, it was deliberately limited, endured as part of a larger purpose. Either way, the cold was met head-on, not escaped. And as you prepare to rise again into another frozen morning, you carry that understanding with you steady and quiet, like breath in cold air. The castle looks like it should protect you from everything, including the cold, thick walls, high towers, stone piled on stone with the confidence of power. But once you are inside, night falls and the fire burns low, you realize how little those walls care about warmth. They were built to keep enemies out, not to keep heat in. You feel the scale of the place immediately. Ceilings rise far above your head, letting what little warmth there is drift upward and vanish. Corridors stretch long and bare, acting like channels that invite drafts to move freely. Every step echoes, and with each echo comes a faint reminder of how much empty air surrounds you. Great halls are the worst. Impressive by day, punishing by night. A single hearth struggles to warm a space meant to host dozens. The fire looks small here, almost embarrassed by the size of the room. You sit close if you can, but most of the hall remains cold, the stone drinking in heat without returning it. Records from noble households reveal constant complaints about winter conditions inside castles. Lords ordered tapestries hung not just for decoration, but to block drafts and trap warmth. Thick fabrics lined walls, softened sound, and made rooms marginally more bearable. Without them, stone radiated cold relentlessly. You brush your hand along one of these hanging fabrics and feel the difference immediately. Behind it, the wall is still cold, but less aggressively so. Air trapped between cloth and stone forms a thin buffer. It is not comfort, it is mitigation. Sleeping arrangements reflect this reality. Noble beds are large, but not because of luxury alone. Multiple layers of bedding pile high. Feather mattresses, when available, lift sleepers away from the cold floor. Canopies draped with heavy curtains create a small enclosed space within the larger room, holding warmth close to the way. You step into one of these bed spaces and notice how sound changes. The vast hall fades. Breathing feels louder, warmer, more contained. The bed becomes a room inside a room, designed to carve out survivable space from an otherwise hostile interior. Even so, the cold seeps in. Stone towers cool quickly after sunset. Upper rooms suffer more than lower ones, exposed to wind from every side. Servants sleep closer to kitchens or lower levels where residual warmth lingers. Status does not guarantee comfort at night. There is an odd workaround mentioned in some household notes. Large dogs were sometimes encouraged to sleep near or on beds during winter, valued less as companions than as moving sources of heat. Their presence was tolerated, even welcome, when temperatures dropped far enough. You sense how difficult it is to heat a place never meant to be warm. Fires burn constantly in winter, consuming vast amounts of fuel. Wood is hauled daily, ash removed endlessly. Keeping a castle merely livable takes work that never stops. Modern interpretations differ on whether castles were actually colder than cottages. Some argue their size made them worse. Others point out access to resources, fuel and labour may have balanced that out. Walking these halls at night, you feel both truths at once. Grandeur brings problems small houses never face. You hear footsteps echo down a separate corridor. Night watch. Guards move to keep circulation in their limbs as much as for security. Standing still too long invites cold to settle deeply. Movement becomes another way to survive. The air smells different here. Less animal, less smoke, more stone, more dampness. Moisture clings to walls, making cold feel heavier. Fires help, but only where they reach. As you lie down wrapped in layers inside curtains meant to trap what little warmth exists, you understand the quiet irony. The strongest buildings of the medieval world offered less comfort than the simplest homes. Protection from people came at the cost of exposure to the elements. Still, dawn will come here too. Light will spill into narrow windows. Fires will be fed again. Life will resume its careful dance with cold. And until then, you rest within stone that guards you fiercely even as it refuses to keep you warm. The city never truly sleeps, even in winter, but it does grow quieter, tighter as night takes hold. You move through narrow streets where buildings lean close together, their upper floors almost touching. This closeness changes the cold. Wind has less room to rush, but dampness lingers longer, clinging to stone and timber alike. Urban homes share walls, which helps more than you might expect. Heat from one household seeps into the next, softening the edges of the night. You feel it when you press your hand against a shared wall. Not warm exactly, but less hostile than an outer wall exposed to open air. Cities create their own fragile insulation through density alone. You smell the night before you hear it. Smoke from countless hearths mixes with refuse, damp earth and human presence. The air is thick, heavier than in the countryside. Cold here does not bite as sharply, but it weighs more, settling into clothes and lungs. Municipal records show repeated efforts to regulate fires in towns, especially at night. Too many fires meant danger. Too few meant misery. Curfews limited movement after dark, not only for order, but because open doors let precious heat escape and invited drafts into crowded homes. You notice how windows glow faintly along the street, small squares of firelight behind shutters. Each one marks a household enduring the same night in its own tight space. Sound travels differently here. Voices echo briefly, then vanish. Footsteps on frozen ground announce themselves sharply, then fade around corners. Inside, an urban dwelling space is compressed. Rooms are smaller, ceilings lower. This helps. Heat gathers more easily. A single fire can do more work here than in a hall or a castle chamber. You sit close, knees nearly touching the hearth stones, feeling warmth concentrate instead of disperse. Beds are stacked where possible. Loft spaces hold sleepers above ground level, away from the cold pooling below. You climb a ladder carefully, each rung cold to the touch, and settle into a sleeping space barely tall enough to sit upright. It feels cramped, but the air is warmer here. There is a curious habit noted in city ordinances. Night watchmen were required to call out the hour not only to mark time, but to signal that someone remained awake to respond to fire or trouble. Their voices cut through the cold, steady and reassuring, reminding sleepers that vigilance continued. You hear one now, distant but clear. The call fades into the maze of streets absorbed by stone. It is comforting in its way. Someone else is bearing the night's burden. Urban poverty makes winter nights especially dangerous. Those without proper shelter crowd into doorways, under stairs, anywhere that blocks wind. City authorities sometimes tolerated this in extreme cold, understanding that exposure killed quickly. Warmth became a matter of mercy as much as order. Inside, you adjust your bedding again, mindful of neighbours above and below. Movement transmits through floors and walls. Everyone learns to shift quietly, preserving warmth and sleep for all. In crowded spaces, cooperation is unspoken but essential. There is still debate among historians about whether city life offered a better winter survival than rural isolation. Shared walls and resources helped. Crowding and disease hurt. Cold was only one factor among many. Tonight you feel both sides of that balance. The night deepens, fires dim across the city in uneven rhythms. Some households bank embers carefully. Others let flames die, trusting layers and shared heat to carry them through until dawn. You lie still, listening to the muffled city around you. A cart in the distance, a door closing softly. The watchman's voice again, marking time you cannot see. The cold presses in, but the city presses back, holding just enough warmth between its walls to make survival possible. And as sleep returns in short, gentle stretches, you understand how urban nights shape their own kind of endurance. Not quiet like the countryside, not vast like a castle, but close crowded and stubbornly alive through the cold. Out here, the night feels wider. The countryside does not press in around you the way the city does. There are no shared walls borrowing warmth, no watchman's call threading through darkness. When winter night falls in rural England, it settles, fully spreading across fields and hedgerows, until everything feels equally exposed. You lie in a house that stands alone, or nearly so. Wind has room to gather speed before it reaches you. It hits the walls with more force, slipping into every weakness it can find. You hear it long before you feel it, a low rush across open land, followed by the soft tapping of branches or the rattle of loose thatch. Distance changes everything. Neighbours are farther away. Help, if needed, is not just a shout across a wall. It is a walk through cold and darkness. That knowledge shapes how nights are faced. You prepare more carefully. You check the fire twice. You make sure animals are settled and close. You seal the door as well as you can. Inside, the space feels smaller than it did during the day. Darkness compresses it. Shadows fill corners. The fire seems like the only anchor in a sea of cold. You stay close even as sleep approaches, unwilling to drift too far from the centre of warmth. The land outside contributes its own chill. Fields stripped bare after harvest reflect cold upward. Damp ground releases moisture into the air, making cold cling to fabric and skin. When frost comes, it brings clarity but sharpens the night even further. You feel that sharpness through walls and floor alike. Rural homes rely more heavily on animals than urban ones, and the reliance deepens at night. Livestock are not just nearby, they're essential. Their presence is checked before sleep, not only for safety but for warmth. A quiet animal means heat is being made steadily and visibly. You listen for those sounds now. A shift of weight, a low breath, hooves settling. These noises carry reassurance across the dark. Silence where there should be sound brings tension even if nothing is wrong. The night encourages listening as much as rest. Food supplies weigh on your mind more heavily here. In town, markets exist. In the countryside, what you stored is what you have. Winter nights remind you of this with every shiver. Fires consume fuel quickly. Bodies burn calories constantly. Everything spent tonight must be replaced later. You adjust your bedding again, aware of how thin the margin feels. The house holds but barely. Straw in the walls, cloth in the gaps, thick doors doing their best. Nothing here is designed for comfort. Everything is designed to last. There is a habit you notice that seems to belong especially to isolated places. People rise more often during the night. Not fully awake, but alert enough to check embers, listen to animals, feel the air. This broken sleep is not anxiety. It is stewardship. Someone must remain aware. Cold shapes time differently out here. Without bells or voices to mark hours, the night feels endless. You measure it by changes in temperature by the fire's glow fading, by the stiffness in your joints. Dawn is not anticipated by sound. It is awaited by sensation. You sense how much responsibility rests on the household itself. No authority will intervene if the fire goes out. No neighbour will notice a problem until morning. Survival feels personal and immediate. Every decision matters a little more. As sleep comes and goes, you think about how isolation magnifies cold. The same temperature feels harsher when you know help is far away. The body reacts not just to chill but to context. Loneliness makes winter sharper. Still, there is also a quiet strength here. The rhythms are known. People who live this way understand their environment deeply. They know how a wind moves across fields. They know where frost settles first. They know how long embers last if banked just right. You breathe slowly, matching your rhythm to the house, to the animals, to the land itself. Outside, the countryside lies frozen and vast. Inside, a small pocket of warmth persists, held together by habit, vigilance, and effort. Eventually, the night begins its slow turn toward morning. You feel it before you see it, a subtle easing of tension. A sense that the cold has reached its peak and can go no farther. You remain still, conserving warmth, trusting that endurance will be enough. In the rural, dark winter nights are not softened by proximity or shared walls. They are faced directly with preparation, patience, and the quiet knowledge that surviving until dawn is a task that begins again every evening. Illness feels closer at night, especially in winter. You sense it not as a specific threat, but as a possibility that grows stronger when the cold lingers too long. Bodies already tired from work become quieter, slower, and the line between rest and weakness blurs. You listen to coughs more carefully now. You notice breathing patterns. Sleep is never just sleep. It is a test of how well the body is holding together. Cold nights drain strength in subtle ways, muscles stiffen and do not recover fully. Fingers lose dexterity, chests tighten. When morning comes, some people rise slower than they did the day before. This accumulation matters. One hard night is manageable. Many in a row wear the body down. People understood this through observation, not theory. They knew that winter sickness often followed long cold spells. Fevers appeared after nights when fires failed or food ran thin. Aches that began as discomfort sometimes turned into something more serious. Warmth was not seen as luxury, it was prevention. You adjust your position again, mindful of how stillness can invite trouble. Complete immobility feels dangerous in winter. A little movement keeps blood flowing. Too much movement releases heat. You find the balance without thinking about it. Sleep itself changes in response to cold. It becomes lighter, more fragmented. You drift, wake, adjust, drift again. Deep, unbroken sleep is rare on the coldest nights. Bodies remain semi-alert, ready to respond to discomfort or sound. This kind of sleep leaves you less rested, but more responsive. Some healers advised people to sleep longer in winter, believing extended rest conserved heat and strength. Others warned against too much stillness, noting that stiffness worsened illness. Advice varied, shaped by experience rather than consensus. You feel the dryness in your throat now, a side effect of fire-warmed air and shallow breathing. Someone nearby shifts and drinks. Briefly careful not to sill. Fluids matter even when the body does not ask loudly for them. A curious practice shows up in winter care. People sometimes slept closer to those who seemed weak or unwell, sharing warmth deliberately. This carried risk, but cold was seen as the greater danger. Keeping someone warm could mean the difference between recovery and decline. You notice how the house responds to illness. Fires burn a little longer, bedding is doubled, drafts are blocked more carefully, other tasks are postponed. The night reorganizes itself around care. Uncertainty runs through all of this. Some people recover quickly after a few warmer nights, others do not. The same cold affects bodies differently. Strength age, diet, and sheer luck all play a role. People notice patterns but could not control outcomes. You hear a cough again, deeper this time. Then a pause, then steady breathing resumes. Relief passes through the room silently. Vigilance relaxes just a fraction. Cold nights expose weakness, but they also reveal resilience. Bodies adapt, households adjust, small changes add up. A bit more fuel, an extra blanket, a closer sleeping arrangement. These decisions are made quietly without ceremony. As the night moves on, you feel the balance holding for now. The cold remains, but illness does not advance. Sleep returns in short, manageable stretches. That is enough. You understand that winter survival was never only about staying warm in the moment. It was about protecting the body's ability to recover night after night. Warmth preserved strength, strength resisted sickness. And each night endured gave the body another chance to face the morning. Night invites thoughts that daylight keeps quiet. In winter, those thoughts grow heavier, shaped by darkness and cold working together. You feel it now the way the mind searches for meaning, when the body is uncomfortable and still. Cold makes the night feel alive, and anything alive can be imagined as listening. People did not face winter darkness empty-handed. Stories filled the gaps where certainty failed. Whispers about what moved after sunset travelled easily in a world without light. You keep closer to the fire not only for warmth, but because it feels safer there. Fire pushes shadows back. Shadows are where worries gather. Certain sounds at night carry weight. A sudden knock of ice falling from thatch, a branch scraping the wall. The distant cry of an animal. Each one asks a question your half-sleeping mind tries to answer. Is it natural? Is it warning? Is it nothing at all? Cold sharpens these questions. You remember how people marked thresholds carefully. Doors were secured not just against wind, but against whatever might follow it inside. Small objects hung near entrances, iron, wood carved with simple symbols. These were not dramatic gestures. They were habits repeated quietly night after night. A belief lingers that winter nights are thinner, somehow that the distance between worlds narrows when cold deepens and darkness stretches long. Whether taken literally or not, the feeling shaped behaviour. People stayed close together. They avoided wandering after dark unless necessary. Warmth and safety became entwined. Children absorbed these ideas early. Stories told by the hearth carried warnings and reassurance in equal measure. Stay close, listen, do not stray. Fear served a purpose, keeping small bodies near warmth and watchful eyes. You notice how even adults move differently at night. Steps are careful, voices lower, laughter rare. The night demands respect, not panic, but attention. There is comfort in routine here. The same prayers, the same gestures, the same fire tended in the same way. Repetition steadies the mind when the body is tested. Knowing what comes next makes cold easier to endure. Some nights people believed dreams carried messages sharpened by winter. Sleep broken by cold felt more vivid. Images lingered longer. People spoke of these dreams in the morning, weighing their meaning against the season that shaped them. Uncertainty runs quietly through all of this. Not everyone believed the same things. Some dismissed stories as foolish. Others held them close. The night allowed room for both. Cold did not care what you believed, but belief shaped how you faced it. You pull your blanket tighter, not because it adds much warmth, but because the gesture itself feels protective. A small barrier between you and the dark. Ritual does not always solve problems. Sometimes it simply makes them bearable. As the hours pass, the mind settles again. Imagination softens, familiar sounds return, the house creaks. The fire breathes low, animals shift and sigh, nothing unseen announces itself. You drift towards sleep once more, reassured not by certainty but by the absence of trouble. Winter nights carried fear, but they also carried stories that helped people stay still, stay close and stay warm until morning. And in that quiet balance between imagination and endurance, you rest again, letting the night pass without asking it too many questions. Some people do not sleep through winter nights at all. You become aware of them as the hours stretch on the ones whose work begins when others finally settle. The cold does not excuse them. It simply becomes part of the job. You imagine a watchman stepping carefully along a dark street or courtyard, breath visible with every exhale. Standing still would be dangerous. Cold would sink into joints too quickly. So they walk, pause, listen, then walk again. Movement is warmth, stillness invites trouble. In towns, these night workers serve many purposes at once. They watch for fire, which is as frightening as cold in winter. They listen for signs of theft or unrest. They keep time in a world without clocks most people can see. Their calls cut through the dark, measured and steady, letting sleepers know someone remains awake. Out in the countryside, the role looks different. A farmer may rise to check animals, especially during hard freezes. Water troughs ice over. Livestock can panic if cold bites too sharply. A quiet visit in the middle of the night prevents loss by morning. You feel the difference between chosen wakefulness and forced alertness. These people prepare for it. Extra layers. Warm food saved for late hours. A place by the fire before and after patrol. Their nights are broken deliberately, not reluctantly. Household routines reflect this reality. Someone always knows how to tend the fire half asleep. Someone listens even while resting. Winter nights demand shared responsibility spread across waking and sleeping bodies alike. There is a curious habit noted in some towns. Watchmen carried simple noisemakers, rattles or staffs, not only to signal presence but to keep blood moving in their hands. Sound became warmth by encouraging motion. You notice how those who wake others at night do so carefully. A quiet knock, a low voice. Panic wastes heat. Calm preserves it. Even emergencies are approached deliberately when cold sharpens every movement. Sleep becomes more segmented in winter because of this rhythm. You rest. You wake briefly, you rest again. This pattern is not seen as failure, it is adaptation. The night is too long, too cold to surrender to fully at once. Some records suggest that people expected this broken sleep and planned around it. Night prayers, quiet work, checking fires, the cold shaped time as much as the sun did. You think about how different this feels from modern nights sealed and silent. Here awareness never fully fades. Someone is always listening, always moving, always watching for change. As you drift back towards sleep, you take comfort in that vigilance. Not because danger is expected, but because cold demands attention. The night is endured collectively through wakefulness and rest woven together. And while you sleep, again wrapped in layers and shared warmth, others walk through the dark, keeping the fragile balance of winter intact until morning returns. Cold nights make people inventive. When the usual arrangements fail, when fire burns too low or bedding feels too thin, you reach for whatever might help, even if it was never meant for warmth. Survival encourages creativity, especially when the alternative is a long, shivering night. You hear about these tricks in passing, not written proudly but remembered, because they worked. Heated stones pulled from the hearth and wrapped in cloth. They are placed near feet or tucked against the lower back. The warmth lasts longer. Then firelight fading slowly into the night. You have to be careful. Too hot, and the stone burns skin or fabric. Too cool, and it does nothing. Experience teaches the difference. Another improvised solution appears when fuel runs short. People pile extra ash over embers thicker than usual, slowing heat loss even more. The fire looks dead, but warmth lingers beneath the surface. This risks a colder room early on, but pays off later when rekindling is easier and fingers are less numb. You adjust your sleeping place again, this time with intention. Straw is shifted to block drafts. Blankets are folded and layered rather than spread wide. A folded cloak under the torso makes the floor feel less hostile. These are small changes, but they add up. There is a habit that surprises modern ears. Some people slept with wooden boards or even tools tucked beneath blankets, believing solid objects help trap warmth. The logic is flawed, but the practice persisted because sometimes the weight itself felt reassuring, pressing fabric closer to the body and sealing in heat. Water becomes an unlikely ally. Warmed, slightly sealed in a container and placed near bedding, it releases heat slowly. The danger of leaks keeps this from being common, but in extreme cold people take calculated risks. Every option is weighed against the night ahead. You notice how these methods circulate quietly. One household learned something useful. It is mentioned to a neighbour. The idea spreads altered slightly each time. There is no authority deciding what works. Winter decides. Not every solution is effective. Some waste effort, some offer comfort without warmth. But even ineffective tricks matter. They give a sense of agency, a feeling that the night can be shaped rather than simply endured. You feel the difference when something works. Cold loosens its grip slightly, muscles relax, breathing deepens, sleep comes a little easier. That success is remembered, carried forward into the next night. As you lie there now benefiting from one or two of these small interventions, you understand that medieval survival was not rigid. It was flexible, experimental, responsive. People did not wait for perfect solutions. They used what they had learned quickly and adjusted constantly. Outside, the cold remains unchanged. Inside, human ingenuity carves out just enough comfort to make rest possible. And as sleep settles again, supported by a warmed stone, an extra layer, or a clever adjustment, you drift onward, grateful for the quiet creativity that helped people endure the harshest nights. The cold is most dangerous for us where there is no shelter to meet it. You sense this now in the way the night feels less forgiving at the edges of settlement, where walls thin out and warmth becomes a private resource rather than a shared one. For those without a stable place to sleep, winter nights are not an inconvenience. They are a threat that returns every evening. You imagine a figure tucked into a doorway, back pressed against wood knees, drawn up tight. Stone beneath, wind above, the body becomes its own shelter folded inward to conserve what little heat it can make. Every movement is measured. Shivering is allowed only briefly, too much and exhaustion follows. Town ordinances from time to time hint at this reality without naming it directly. Rules appear about who may sleep where, when doors must be closed, when fires are allowed to burn. Enforcement often softened during extreme cold. People understood, even if they did not always say it, that exposure killed quickly. You feel how different cold becomes without a hearth nearby. There is no focal point for warmth, no place to rotate toward. The body loses heat evenly and relentlessly. Clothing does its best, but without rest or shared warmth, it is never enough. Some people rely on proximity, sleeping near bakeries where ovens still hold heat from the day, huddling near walls that catch the sun even hours after sunset, finding shelter where animals are kept drawn by the same warmth that draws you. These choices are made quietly, often in darkness, guided by knowledge of the town's rhythms. A small, often overlooked gesture appears in winter accounts. Householders sometimes left embers glowing longer than usual or cracked doors just enough to let warmth spill outward. Not enough to invite trouble, just enough to ease the night beyond their walls. Kindness was measured carefully in winter, but it existed. You notice how the cold changes the meaning of generosity. A crust of bread matters less than a place to stand out of the wind. A shared blanket matters more than coin. Warmth becomes the most valuable thing anyone can offer. Illness moves quickly in these conditions. Bodies weakened by hunger and exposure do not recover easily. Coughs deepen, limbs stiffen, sleep becomes shallow and dangerous. The line between rest and collapse is thin. Some shelters exist attached to religious houses or charities, offering crowded floors and minimal fire. These places are loud, uncomfortable, and often tense, but they keep people alive. Warmth is shared, uneasily guarded, and negotiated through the night. You feel the weight of these nights differently. Cold here is not managed. It is resisted. Survival depends on endurance, luck, and the willingness of others to bend rules when weather turns cruel. Inside your own shelter, however modest, you become more aware of what it provides. Walls matter. Fire matters. Companionship matters. The night teaches gratitude through contrast. As sleep finds you again, you hold that awareness quietly. Medieval winter was not faced equally by everyone. Some endured with preparation and routine. Others faced it raw, exposed to every shift of wind and temperature. The cold does not distinguish between them, but people do. And as the night stretches on, you understand how survival depended not only on personal resilience, but on the fragile networks of mercy, tolerance, and shared warmth that held communities together until morning. Warmth does not appear on its own. It is made, maintained, and often repaired quietly, mostly by hands that rarely receive credit. You notice this now as the night settles into its deepest hours. Someone has already risen once to block a draft. Someone else tightened a blanket around a child without waking them. None of this announces itself. It simply happens. Much of the work that makes winter nights survivable happens before sleep ever begins, and much of it falls to women. You see the results everywhere. Bedding cleaned and layered earlier in the day. Clothing mended so cold air cannot slip through seams. Food prepared in ways that will still offer warmth hours later. These efforts are invisible by nightfall, but the night depends on them. You run your fingers along the edge of a blanket and feel where it has been repaired, stitches uneven but strong. This blanket has history. It has been adjusted again and again, not for beauty but for function. A loose edge invites cold, a thin spot steals heat. Someone noticed and fixed it long before you lay down. Spinning and weaving matter more in winter than any other season. Wool does not appear by accident. It is cleaned, spun, woven, and shaped over many hours, often in cold rooms, fingers stiff and sore. The warmth you feel now carries that earlier discomfort within it. You think about the quiet rhythm of these tasks, spinning by the fire as daylight fades, stitching by low light, sorting straw, hanging cloth to dry where smoke will not saturate it completely. Each decision shapes how the night will feel later. Children learn these rhythms early. Girls especially are taught how to judge fabric by touch, how to fold layers efficiently, how to notice drafts before they become problems. This knowledge is not written down, it is absorbed through repetition. The cold respects preparation. A household where clothing is mended, bedding is layered properly and food is planned, endures winter nights differently than one that neglects these details. The difference is not dramatic, but it is constant. You notice how small adjustments continue even now. A hand reaches out to smooth a blanket that has shifted. Someone listens, senses the air, moves a stool slightly to block a draft from the door. These acts are quiet, almost automatic. There is a particular awareness that comes with this work. Warmth is fragile. Lose track of it for a moment and the night grows harsher. Those who manage it learn to think ahead, to notice patterns, to anticipate cold rather than react to it. This labour does not end at bedtime. Someone wakes earlier than others to tend embers. Someone checks on children before dawn. The night is not a pause, it is another phase of work, slower and quieter but just as necessary. You feel gratitude settle in without words. The warmth you have now is not accidental. It is the result of hours, days, even seasons of effort. Sheep tended, wool spun, cloth repaired, food stored. All of it converges in this moment of relative comfort. As sleep returns again, you understand that medieval survival rested as much on care as on endurance. Strength mattered, ingenuity mattered, but so did patience, attention, and the willingness to repeat small tasks endlessly. The cold presses in as always, but it meets resistance in every layer, every stitch, every quiet decision made earlier. And wrapped in that unseen labour, you rest again, held by work done in advance, carried forward gently into the dark. The night stretches longer in winter, and your body adjusts to that fact in ways so gradual you hardly notice them. Sleep no longer arrives in one solid block. Instead, it comes in waves. You drift, you surface, you drift again. This rhythm feels natural here, shaped by darkness that lasts far beyond what the body expects. You wake briefly, not startled, just aware. The fire is still alive, though barely. The room feels colder than it did before, or maybe you're simply more aware of it now. You pull fabric closer, then lie still again. This waking is not a failure. It is part of the pattern. People in medieval England did not expect to sleep straight through the night, especially in winter. Long hours of darkness invited pauses. Some used these moments for quiet prayer. Others checked the fire, listened to animals, or shared a few low words before settling again. The night was not something to escape. It was something to move through in stages. You notice how your thoughts behave differently during these pauses. They are slower, less urgent. The world feels distant. Even worries soften, dulled by cold and fatigue. You think about practical things first. Is everyone covered? Is the door sealed? Is the fire holding? Once those questions are answered, the mind loosens its grip. These waking moments are brief, but they matter. They allow the body to respond to changing conditions. If the fire fades too much, someone notices. If a child shifts and uncovers an arm, a hand reaches out to fix it. Continuous sleep would make these adjustments harder. The cold itself seems to cue these awakenings. As warmth dips, awareness rises. When heat builds again, even slightly sleep follows. The body and environment converse quietly all night long. You hear movement from someone else who is also woken. A soft cough, a shift of straw. No one speaks. Words are unnecessary. Shared experience fills the silence. There is comfort in knowing this pattern is expected. No one worries about being awake in the dark. The night is long. There is time for rest to come and go. Morning does not arrive suddenly. It creeps. You rest again, deeper this time. When you wake once more, it feels different. The cold has reached its peak and begun to loosen just barely. The air feels less sharp. The fire is almost gone, but the worst has passed. As dawn approaches, sleep grows heavier. The body senses the coming light even before it appears. Muscles relax, breathing deepens. The segmented night draws toward its end. You understand now that medieval sleep was shaped by environment more than habit. Winter nights taught bodies to rest in pieces, to remain responsive, to share responsibility even in half sleep. Wrapped in layers, surrounded by quiet signs of life, you let this final stretch of rest take you. The night has done what it can. Morning is on its way, slow and pale, and you are ready to meet it. Some winters refuse to behave. You sense it in the way people talk about certain years in lowered voices, as if naming them might invite a return. Cold was expected. Hardship was normal, but every so often a winter arrived that stretched patience thin and left memories sharp. You lie awake and think about those seasons passed down through stories rather than dates. Nights when fires burned constantly and still failed to warm rooms. Mornings when water froze solid indoors. Days when the ground stayed locked and work slowed not by choice but by necessity. These winters did not blend into the background. They stood apart. The cold during these years reached deeper. Animals suffered first, milk production dropped, livestock weakened. When animals struggled, people followed. Warmth became harder to maintain because the systems that supported it strained all at once. You imagine how nights like this felt. More layers added, yet never enough. More fuel burned, yet supplies dwindled faster than expected. Sleep shortened, waking moments lengthened, cold seeped into places it usually spared. People remembered these winters because they changed behavior long after they passed. Extra fuel stored the following year. More straw kept near sleeping areas, doors reinforced, roofs repaired with greater care. Memory became preparation. Stories carried warnings. Elders spoke of nights when breath froze on blankets, when even shared warmth failed to comfort. These stories were not told to frighten, but to instruct. Winter could always grow worse. Readiness mattered. During these extreme seasons, routines bent. Fires burned longer despite the risk. Animals moved closer to people than ever before. Food meant for later months was eaten early. Survival demanded flexibility. You feel how the cold outside tonight is manageable by comparison. Harsh, yes. Demanding, certainly. But not catastrophic. That distinction matters. People learned to measure winter not by temperature alone, but by whether the systems they relied on still functioned. There is no single account that captures these winters fully. One place might suffer while another fares slightly better. One household might endure while another fails. Cold did not arrive evenly, and neither did its effects. What remained consistent was how people responded. Communities leaned inward. Help was offered more freely. Rules softened. Winter tested not only bodies but bonds. You imagine lying here during such a winter, listening to the fire struggle, feeling the cold press harder than usual. Fear would be present, but so would determination. Nights like those demanded everything people had learned about endurance. As you rest now, you understand that medieval survival was shaped not just by ordinary nights, but by these exceptional ones. They sharpened knowledge. They reinforced habits. They reminded people that warmth was never guaranteed. The night you are in feels gentler by contrast. The cold presses, but it does not overwhelm. That knowledge brings its own comfort. You breathe slowly, letting the house do its work, trusting that this winter at least will pass without becoming one of the remembered ones. The smallest comforts begin to matter more as the night wears on. Not the kind that banish cold, because nothing does that completely, but the kind that soften its edges just enough to make endurance easier. You notice them now, one by one, because your senses have slowed and sharpened at the same time. There is the way the blanket is folded at your feet doubled, where cold always seems to gather. Someone did that earlier, knowing, without thinking, that feet lose warmth first. There is the position of the stool near the door, angled just enough to interrupt the draft that sneaks in at floor level. It looks accidental. It is not. You hear the faint sound of embers shifting, not from someone adding fuel, but from heat settling into ash. That sound tells you the fire is still alive. Not strong, but present. Knowing this lets your shoulders drop a fraction, easing tension you did not realize you were holding. Smell becomes comfort too. Smoke wool cooked grain. These are not pleasant in the modern sense, but they are familiar. Familiarity itself becomes warming. It tells you nothing has gone wrong. The house is behaving as expected. Someone nearby breathes deeply in sleep, a long, slow exhale that seems to signal safety. You match your breathing to it unconsciously, letting your body follow a rhythm that feels steadier than your own. Hands find familiar textures. Rough wood, worn for some fabric, straw flattened smooth by use. Touch anchors you in the present moment, keeping imagination from wandering too far into the dark. Cold makes the mind restless. Texture calms it. There is comfort in repetition. The same sounds each night. The same small adjustments. Knowing where the cold will press hardest and preparing for it before it arrives. Predictability becomes a form of shelter. Even light plays a role. The faint glow beneath ash is barely visible, but it is enough to soften shadows. Complete darkness feels colder, somehow heavier. A hint of light makes the room feel inhabited, held. You realize that many of these comforts are not planned consciously. They are habits formed over countless nights. A hand always reaching to the same place, a blanket always folded the same way, a pause always taken to listen before sleeping again. These details rarely appear in records or stories. They are too ordinary, but they are what make the difference between panic and patience, between restless shivering and manageable discomfort. As sleep returns again, it feels gentler this time. The body has adjusted. The worst of the cold has passed. Small comforts have done their quiet work. You rest now, not because you are warm, but because the environment feels stable. Nothing needs immediate attention. The night can be allowed to continue on its own. And in this space between discomfort and rest, you understand that medieval survival was built from moments like these. Not dramatic victories over cold, but 1,000 small choices that made the night livable. Wrapped in those choices, you drift again, letting the night carry you toward morning, one quiet comfort at a time. By now, you no longer measure the night in hours. Time has thinned in sensation. Cold easing, muscles loosening, breath slowing. The question is no longer how warm you are, but whether you can continue as you are until light returns. Endurance becomes the quiet goal. You feel it in the way your body has adapted. Shivering has stopped not because warmth has arrived, but because your system has found equilibrium. Heat made, heat lost, balance just well enough. This state feels fragile, but it holds. People living these nights learned that comfort was not something to expect. Comfort suggested softness, ease, excess. Winter required something else: acceptance, patience, the ability to remain still inside discomfort without letting it grow into distress. You think about how little anyone here complains, not because they are stoic by nature, but because complaint changes nothing. Energy is better spent adjusting a blanket, blocking a draft, or breathing slowly. Words are saved for daylight. The house feels smaller now, not because it has shrunk, but because your awareness has narrowed. Fire, bodies, walls, everything else fades. This focus conserves warmth as surely as wool or stone. There is dignity in this kind of endurance, not dramatic, not heroic. Just steady, the ability to meet the night as it is and remain present within it. People measure success in mornings reached, not nights conquered. You notice how anticipation of dawn changes the feeling of cold. Knowing it will end makes it easier to tolerate. Even before light appears, the body senses the turn. The deepest cold has passed. The air shifts slightly. Something loosens. Memory plays a role here too. Nights like this have been endured before. They will be endured again. That knowledge settles in quietly, lending strength without excitement. As sleep comes and goes in its final fragments, you rest inside this understanding. The night has tested you. You have responded. That is enough. Outside, the world remains still. Inside, the fragile system of warmth continues to function. Fire breathes low. Animals remain calm. People sleep lightly. And as the edge of morning approaches, you realize that survival was never about eliminating discomfort. It was about learning how to live within it calmly, patiently, until change arrived on its own. You sense morning before you see it. The cold changes a character first. It loosens, not warming exactly, but easing its grip as if it has reached the limit of what it can take. Your body notices this shift immediately. Muscles relax, breathing deepens. The night, which once felt endless, begins to feel finite. Light arrives slowly. Not sunlight, just a thinning of darkness. Shadows soften, edges blur. Someone stirs nearby, careful not to wake others too abruptly. The fire is nearly gone now, but it has done its work. It carried you through. You move slightly, testing fingers and toes. Stiff but responsive. Cold still present but no longer dominant. Morning always feels like proof that the methods worked. That preparation, patience, and countless small adjustments added up to survival once again. People rise gradually. No sudden movements. The body needs time to wake from cold. Stretching happens slowly. Joints complain, then settle. Someone brushes ash aside and breathes gently onto embers, coaxing a faint glow back to life. The day will need warmth too. Outside the world looks different now. Frost catches light. Breath clouds fade faster. The night's danger recedes into memory, almost immediately replaced by tasks waiting to be done. Water must be fetched. Animals fed. Fires rebuilt. Winter does not pause for recovery. You understand now how medieval nights shaped days. Fatigue carried forward. Aching bodies worked anyway. Warmth was rebuilt each morning, knowing it would be spent again by evening. Survival was cyclical, never finished. There is quiet satisfaction in this repetition. You made it through. That is enough. There is no celebration, just continuation. Winter demands consistency more than courage. As daylight strengthens, the house opens itself slightly. Doors crack. Smoke thins. Cold retreats outward, at least for a few hours. The night's strategies give way to daytime ones. You step mentally back from the fire, from the blankets, from the tight circle of warmth, carrying the knowledge with you. How people survived was never about a single trick. It was about attention, awareness, willingness to adapt again and again. And as the medieval morning settles fully around you, you feel gratitude, not for comfort, but for endurance. The night has passed, the cold will return, but now you know exactly how people faced it one long winter night at a time. Wind down. Now the pace slows even more. You do not need to hold the night in your mind anymore. Let it drift away, the fire fading, the cold softening into memory. Imagine the room emptying of effort, the tension releasing from shoulders, hands, breath. You can picture the frost melting slowly as light grows stronger, not rushed, not forced. Just a gentle change, the kind that happens whether you watch it or not, the kind you can trust. Think of all those nights across centuries endured quietly, without drama, without complaint. People resting when the sea could, waking when they needed to, sharing warmth, sharing space, sharing the long work of making it through winter. You're allowed to rest now without listening for embers or drafts. No doors to seal, no fire to tend. Just the slow, steady rhythm of breathing, safe and unhurried. Let the images soften. Stone walls blur. Straw fades. Smoke lifts. The night dissolves into a calm, distant place, no longer demanding attention. Stay right here in this feeling of quiet completion. Nothing else needs to happen. Nothing needs to be solved. You've made it to morning. Sweet dreams.